Unreal, Mila's Report. Written and narrated by Cindy Gunderson. Chapter 29.5. Alec! As soon as I saw movement at the edge of camp, I ran past the tents in desperation. He left hours ago to do some simple reconnaissance. His words, not mine. When he didn't return, it meant that I was left to pace madly around camp while giving strange and completely unconvincing explanations for my frantic behavior to coalition members. As I got closer, I hesitated, noticing the labored movement of the oddly wide figure in front of me. Could it be...
Mila, a little help?
Alec called. His voice was weary and his breathing ragged. I rushed to the opposite side of the figure in his arms and threw her limp arm over my shoulders.
She needs sleep. She hit her head.
Is this Channel? He nodded as we continued to drag her toward our tent. Why was she...
Long story. Pack up your things. I'll explain, but we have to leave now.
Zane poked his head out of the tent, a troubled look on his face. Alec nodded slowly.
Time to go,
he said simply, then motioned for Zane to open the flap. We carefully maneuvered past the pole and gingerly positioned Channel as best we could on my cot. She was pale, but breathing regularly. Her head was bandaged in cloth that looked suspiciously similar to Alec's shirt. What happened? I asked.
No time,
he said.
Our position's been compromised. We need to get out of here.
Once satisfied that Channel was comfortable, he dashed to the side of the tent, kneeled, and began meticulously replacing things into his pack. I took his lead and began to do the same. What do you mean?
Unreals went into P4.
What? I gasped.
They could be on us any minute. We have no idea how long it took them to pass on the information.
We have to tell Kenna. If they find her...
I don't know, Mila. I'm not sure.
Alec! What the communities are doing is wrong. He stopped, resting on his heels.
I don't know what it is, but something about this.
He motioned around us.
It doesn't sit right with me.
Of course it doesn't. The coalition is pulling people out of their communities. I don't like it either. But what else are they supposed to do? Kenna tried to express her concerns diplomatically and was completely ignored.
Says her.
He resumed packing, ping-ponging between the floor, his cot, and our supply corner. Some of the things she says are true for sure. You're right. I don't know if everything is, but we're going to have to trust someone.
Are we?
Zane piped up. Okay, not you two. Where's Kay when you need her?
She's refilling our water,
Zane said. Why?
Because we thought it would be smart.
I looked between Zane and Alec. Wait, were you... Realization hit and I felt like a complete idiot. When were you planning to tell me? I asked, my face hot. Alec looked at me apologetically.
There was nothing to tell. I was only scouting things out to see.
You haven't trusted her this entire time, I accused, dropping my pack and standing up. All this time I've been talking about going on with Kenna, the plans I've been making once we make it past these boundaries, all of that. You've been ignoring? I could just see them playing along, exchanging amused looks behind my back. Tears stung the corners of my eyes and I clenched my jaw.
Mila, it wasn't like that.
Alec reached out to put a hand on my shoulder, but I pulled back. Hey, Kay said, popping in through the flap, her arms wrapped around 4 water canisters. She scanned the room and froze. Everything okay? I stared daggers at Alec. I'm going to tell Kenna.
Mila.
I held up a hand, spun on my heel, and exited the tent. Less than 40 minutes later, Kay, Zane, Alec, Channel, and I were crammed into the back of a transport with our supplies. A few Unreals chose to come along, but the others were left behind. No time to take them to their boundaries as promised. With P4 aware of the temporary camp location, there was no reason to believe they wouldn't get help. Still, it didn't sit right with me. I stared out my window, even though the landscape was dark. The fact that we were zooming across dirt that took us days to cross left me breathless. Of course, I knew vehicles like this still existed, but seeing them in real life was something else.
Do you remember when Dad's car used to work?
Alec asked, and I turned. Barely.
You were pretty young.
He grinned. I wonder if it would still run if we had a way to charge it. He shrugged.
There are a lot of things that could work if we had a way to charge them.
Channel was stretched out on the floor between our feet. She hadn't made a sound or movement since we loaded her in. Every few minutes, I found myself watching for the rise and fall of her chest. Whether she meant to or not, she saved our lives tonight, and I wanted her to be okay. So what happened? I asked, now that we have time for the long story. Alec looked at Zane, and Kay's eyes dropped to her feet. My eyes widened. Wait, Kay? Were you in on this too? There wasn't anything to be in on, she said quickly, but I did know that Alec was thinking about leaving. So yes, you were in on it, I muttered, folding my arms across my chest.
Whole story, right now,
Alec said, holding up his hands in defense.
The only reason you didn't know was because you were gone when I brought it up. I wasn't trying to hide it from you.
I kept my eyes trained out the window, not gracing him with a response.
I didn't have much of a window, Mila, and you were off talking with Kenna.
I wasn't talking with Kenna.
Well, whatever, someone in the coalition.
True.
And it wasn't like we were going to make any final decisions without you, he continued.
I continued to stare.
Mila, come on,
Alec pleaded. I turned around fully in my seat and met his eyes. The point is, Alec, that you knew how I'd feel about it. You already knew I was fully on board with our current plan. You knew I trusted Kenna and wanted her help in moving east, so you aren't going to convince me that conveniently I wasn't around when you talked about this. He looked defeated, and I slightly regretted my tone for a second.
It wasn't him that brought it up,
Zane said.
It was me. And yes, I did know how you felt about it. When I tried to say something earlier, you blew it off.
You criticize everything, I argued.
That doesn't mean I don't get to have a say.
His eyes burned into mine, and I recognized the irony of the situation. I swallowed my pride and took a deep breath before speaking. I'm sorry. I should have listened. Zane nodded and turned his head. I continued to look directly at him.
What?
He asked, feeling my eyes burning into him. I apologized.
Thank you,
he said, turning again. Shaking my head, I swiveled as far from him as was physically possible in this small space. Usually I would have stormed off, but that wasn't an option in this situation. This would have to do. Kay put her arm over my shoulder. I'm sorry I didn't come and find you. I should have let you know what was going on, she whispered. Thank you. She softly patted my back, then leaned against her seat and closed her eyes. We were all exhausted, I knew that. But Zane, regardless of circumstances, had a special gift of making my blood boil. For more stories like this, like and subscribe.